Our work is titled Reproductions of the Walking Dead, Precarious Parent Scholars in Times of Crisis. We use critical and collaborative autoethnography as a research method, with this work extending from our previous work, Same Storm, Different Nightmares, which was published in Communication Education in July 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic amplified inequities around parent scholars within the neoliberal higher education system. Together, we are 4 precarious parent scholars who navigated doctoral work, dissertation defenses, remote teaching, and family life over the course of the pandemic. We are contingent laborers, like most of your colleagues, who comprise the largest and most vulnerable instructional workforce in the US and Canada, a devastating figure that the Netflix show The Chair failed to represent. Our presentation contains each of our voices, all united by precarity during the pandemic and our time together as current and former doctoral students in the School of Communication at Simon Fraser University.
Hi, I'm Byron. I'm a European mud and married to a woman from Northeast China. We have a biracial 5-year-old daughter.
Hi, I'm Anis. I left a secure job and a large joint family in Bangladesh to pursue higher education in the UK, Canada, and America, only to drag my family into the vortex of uncertainty in the North American job market and migration. We have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old son.
I'm Nicole. Before higher education, I left a stable entrepreneurial career to begin grad school shortly after having my first child. Alongside my Indo-Canadian husband, I'm raising a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter.
I'm Betty. My husband and I are both Ghanaians, but we have lived separately since I started my PhD program with my children in my care. We had our first son after my comprehensive exams and our second right after completing my fieldwork.
The intersections of our collective stories mostly highlight external pressures, the stereotypes of being that we both aspire to and negotiate against. My barriers highlight our shared engagement with the economic, where the financial and future insecurity that comes with the precariousness of higher education impacts domestic life, the stresses and releases that come with internalizing systematic pressures. When I turned from using alcohol and marijuana to abusing them, I was doing so under the notion that these might be temporary crutches. I treated both my dissertation and the pandemic as dark tunnels that one might merely hold their breath to get through. I withdrew as a parent and as a partner. I was physically present and maintained the house and supervised my child. I leaned into doing household chores because I had the privilege of making my own hours and so could be free to supervise a 5-year-old when she no longer had daycare and my partner worked out of her bedroom when our office shut down. These choices, however, were triggers for my substance abuse. Interruptions in my work became moments to imbibe. Times where I could not work became time to intoxicate, to let time pass and escape from the negative emotions I was struggling with. The pandemic was no pause in life, though. My choices harmed my family, restricting the depth of transformative relations to surface-level transactional activities. As such, I've had to learn to be forgiving. Being part of this autoethnographic project has helped me do this. In sharing my experiences and suffering with others, I'm able to interject more reflection into the conditions which surround my home life and my presence in it as a parent scholar.
The pandemic laid bare its human cost for the parent scholars, where they had to occasionally choose between caring for students or their kids, but not both. We become our own oppressor as we comply with the bigger structural oppression, as we are structurally and contractually preconditioned to say yes to any scavenging. For 6 years, I taught every semester on part-time contracts before I obtained the teaching job I'm doing now at an R1 university. This is full-time, but it's still contractual. Academia is a relatively privileged industry compared to many others. For the many contractual bottom-liners who are the majority, it is a wasteland of zombies walking dead without any glorious purpose or even a recognition of being alive. Of course, I'm relatively more privileged than many gig workers around the world. Yet I share a thread of intersectional precarity with these workers. As a laborer in the gig academy, as a privileged brown immigrant from the global South residing at the margin of the global North. My compliance with the gig academy reproduces and deepens subalternity and precarity. The BIPOC contingent faculty members bear the burden of being the most burnout and the most disposable in the higher education sector. One of the most pressing issues with the remote work is that the online teaching space shares one's home, but does not accommodate the conditions of a home and a family, the relationship of which may involve giving childcare, elder care, disability care, as well as self-care. The demise of researcher identity is perhaps the most common tragedy among the parent, instructor, teachers. It is safe to assume that a large majority of caregiving academics are trapped in a vicious cycle. We can't do research because we don't have time, and we can't get hired as a tenure-track professor because we don't have research. These multi-spectral struggles for survival are evident in Nicole's and Betty's accounts.
The motherhood tax has been around long before the pandemic. Let me take you back to March 2014, when my 2-month-old is strapped to my chest in an ergo carrier. After one 3-month semester off of teaching at a local college, I walk into the campus director's office. She looks up at me and she says, "It was so hard to schedule classes with you gone. It would have been easier if you hadn't been away." My jaw almost hit the floor. When I returned to work, I had to pump, but no accommodations were made. Instead, the buzz of a Medela breast pump rang through the bathroom stalls where students constantly joked about the noise. It was completely demoralizing. A year later, I had my daughter. I was taking grad classes and a TA. My professor let me bring my newborn to class, which meant the patriarchy didn't kill my dreams of grad school, but it sure kicked my ass in the evaluation. Comment after comment was like this: "Nicole is sweet and organized, but she graded more difficult than usual. Perhaps it was due to her imbalanced hormone levels due to her pregnancy." These gender-biased evaluations made me sick to my stomach. I entered the pandemic with this dread hanging over my head like a sleeping bat waking up. One day in March 2021, a student logged into my office hours on Zoom, where she proceeded to tell me for 45 minutes about things that had nothing to do with the course. She told me about the stress of flying home to be with her family in India, about her father who was sick with COVID-19 in the room next to her. She told me about the devastation the virus unleashed in India. I've seen it on the news, and my heart is in my stomach just listening to her. I've taught 17 classes since the start of the pandemic, and this type of communicative labor seems to appear over and over again, yet it's invisible to my employer. While teaching during the pandemic, I was teaching about freedom and liberation. In the process, I realized I was teaching pedagogies of the oppressed, to the oppressed, by the oppressed, for the oppressors who pay my meager salary.
Becoming a parent compelled me to forego teaching positions because I could not afford childcare and I did not have the luxury to attend classes or tutorials. My only options were teaching online courses or RA work, which paid less. I could not be a sessional instructor either, which meant I lost out on gaining relevant teaching experience necessary to further my employment in higher education. My husband's financial support is substantial in terms of the proportion of his income, but nominal considering the conversion rate from Ghana cedis into Canadian dollars. The precarity of research assistant positions kept me in a constant state of anxiety. A TA position is precarious because they are only secure for one semester, but an RA is not even guaranteed a semester's worth of employment under normal circumstances. Progressing on my dissertation was one of the few things that helped me cope with stress and regain a sense of purpose. The shutdown measures in March 2020, however, threatened to eliminate the flimsy appearance of succeeding at scholarship that I was grasping onto. My younger son had heart surgery in January of that year. While I stayed with him in the hospital during his recovery, my mother-in-law came from Ghana to be with my older son at home. The cancellation of flights and closure of airports derailed her return. It also confined 2 adults who did not really know each other and 2 toddlers who were unwell and bored into a tiny 2-bedroom unit. The cacophony of fear, of discomfort, tantrums, and anxiety was deafening. With no library access, I wrote in my car. And every time the cold seeped into my skin or I felt cramped from sitting for so long in the uncomfortable seat, I chomped away on a shortbread cookie and I comforted myself by saying, at least I have a car. My university has a really beautiful slogan, engaging the world. Academic institutions Like this, however, fail in ensuring support systems that adequately address the needs of their diverse students, especially parent scholars. The neoliberal logic of hiring practices in higher education do not make concessions for this Ghanaian parent scholar who has had to contend with so many added barriers and difficulties, as well as motherhood. And yet, we are represented as a token of diversity.
So where do we go from here? From this study, we discern three mutually interdependent areas of application: institutional, structural, and ideological.
As a portal to the global south within the global north, the pandemic and higher education dismantled our immigrants' social imagination that academic mobility leads to upward social mobility. We lost friendship, kinship, and social support from home for a more secure and better paying career abroad, and yet embrace the precarity and labor conditions among our colleagues in the hierarchy.
The gender bias in my evaluations reaffirms that students evaluate male professors less severely than female professors. This must change. Academic leaders must begin reducing contingency in the gig academy, and administrators must consider how course evaluations, renewal systems, and promotion or hiring practices for parent scholars can become more equitable.
At the structural level, we need a welfare state that treats education as a social good, recognizes redistributive justice for its employees.
And at the ideological level, we must try to recognize that these are not problems that can be solved by privatizing resilience and individualizing solutions. We need to re-interject the human logic into academia by collectively sharing the roots of humans